The Art of Being Alone, Timeless Lessons for Happiness, Inner Peace, and Self-Reliance. Introduction. Right now, somewhere in the world, someone is surrounded by dozens of people and still feels completely invisible. Someone else is sitting in a quiet room, entirely by themselves, and they have never felt more alive. The difference between these two people is not luck. It is not personality. It is not circumstance. The difference is a single skill that almost nobody teaches you: the ability to be genuinely, deeply comfortable in your own company. Here is a truth that might sting a little. The longest relationship you will ever have is not with your partner, your best friend, or your family. It is the one you have with yourself. You wake up with yourself every single morning. You go to sleep with your own thoughts every single night. And yet, most people treat that relationship like an afterthought. They pour energy into impressing colleagues, maintaining friendships, building their social presence, and learning how to communicate with everyone except the one person who matters most. They fill every gap of silence with a podcast. They scroll through their phone the second they feel a flicker of boredom. They pack their weekend so tightly that there is never a moment to simply sit and breathe. And they do all of this for one reason: they are terrified of what might happen if they stop. But what if stopping is exactly what you need? What if the silence you keep running from is actually the doorway to the peace you've been desperately searching for? Being alone and being lonely are two vastly different experiences, and most people confuse them their entire lives. Loneliness is a hollow ache that tells you something is missing. Solitude is a conscious choice to spend time with the most important person in your world. One drains you, the other fills you up from the inside. And the beautiful irony is this: once you truly learn how to be alone, you will never feel lonely again, even in a room full of strangers. In the pages ahead, you are going to learn something that will quietly transform every area of your life. You will discover how to silence the mental chaos that keeps you anxious, how to build a foundation of self-trust that nothing can crack, how to free yourself from the exhausting need for approval, and how to create a life that feels rich and meaningful even when nobody is watching. Each chapter offers timeless principles and real practical wisdom that will help you trade restlessness for calm and insecurity for unshakable confidence. By the time you finish this journey, you might realize something that surprises you. The companion you have been searching for, the one who could truly make you feel whole, has been sitting right there inside you this entire time. You just never slowed down long enough to meet them. The art of being alone is not about running away from the world. It is about finally arriving home to yourself. Let us begin. Chapter 1. Step into the silence. There is a moment that almost everyone recognizes but rarely talks about. It is the moment when the music stops, the screen goes dark, and the conversation ends. Suddenly, you are sitting in a room with nothing but your own thoughts. And for a lot of people, that moment feels like standing at the edge of a cliff. So they do what most of us do. They grab their phone, they open an app, they text someone, anyone, just to fill the gap. They are not bored, not really. What they are doing is running. They are running from the thoughts and feelings that only show up when there is nowhere left to hide. But here is something worth considering. That quiet space you keep avoiding might be the most important room you ever walk into. Solitude gets a bad reputation because people mistake it for loneliness. But those two things could not be more different. Loneliness is the painful sense that you are disconnected from the world, that something essential is absent. Solitude is something you choose. It is time you set aside to reconnect with yourself, to recharge, to think without interruption. Loneliness leaves you hollow. Solitude makes you whole. And the difference between them has almost nothing to do with whether other people are nearby. It has everything to do with what is happening inside your mind. Picture this. Two people are sitting on a rooftop terrace overlooking a city at sunset. One of them is fidgeting, checking notifications, mentally listing everything they still need to do. The other is leaning back, feeling the warmth of the fading sun, noticing the way the light paints the buildings gold. Same rooftop, same sunset, completely different experiences. The shift is not in the scenery. It is in their inner world. This is one of the earliest and most powerful lessons in learning to be alone. Your peace does not come from your environment. It comes from the relationship you have cultivated with yourself. You can be standing in the most beautiful place on earth and feel absolutely nothing if your mind is in turmoil, and you can be sitting in the most ordinary room imaginable and feel deeply, quietly content if you have learned how to be present. A lot of people spend years chasing the idea that happiness will arrive once they finally land the right job, the right relationship, or the right circle of friends. And sure, those things add color to life, but they cannot replace what is missing on the inside. If you feel uncomfortable being alone with yourself, no amount of company is going to fix that discomfort permanently. People can love you, encourage you, and cheer you on, but they cannot build the quiet inner confidence that only grows when you learn to sit with who you truly are. Think about a time when solitude was forced on you. Maybe a close friendship fell apart unexpectedly. Maybe a relationship ended and suddenly your evenings were wide open. Maybe life just got quieter in a way you did not plan. Those seasons probably felt unsettling at first, but if you are honest, they also gave you something that constant noise never could. They gave you space to reflect, space to ask yourself what actually matters, space to discover strengths you did not know you had because you had never been tested in that way before. Growth almost never announces itself with fireworks. It tends to show up quietly in the moments when nobody else is paying attention. The fear of silence usually comes down to one thing. People believe that if they stop moving, their own thoughts will overwhelm them. And sometimes that fear is valid. Silence can bring old regrets floating to the surface. It can wake up worries you thought you had buried. It can raise questions you've been avoiding for months or even years. But here is what avoiding those thoughts actually does. Nothing. They do not vanish just because you refuse to look at them. They simply wait, growing heavier until the next quiet moment gives them room to surface again. Facing them, even imperfectly, even with trembling hands, is the very first step toward freedom. You cannot heal a wound you pretend does not exist. You cannot understand yourself if you never give yourself permission to listen. And learning to listen does not require some dramatic transformation. It begins with small, almost ridiculously simple actions. Sit for 5 minutes without touching your phone. Go for a walk and resist the urge to put in your earbuds. Eat a meal slowly and notice what your mind does when it is not being entertained. These might sound trivial, but they teach your nervous system something profound. They teach it that silence is not a threat. It is safe ground. The more you practice, the more natural it becomes. And somewhere along the way, something shifts. You stop seeing time alone as dead time. You start recognizing it as some of the most alive time you have. It becomes the space where you think before you react, where you process your emotions before they process you, where you reconnect with the version of yourself that gets drowned out by the daily noise. You develop a mind that does not need constant input to feel steady. And that is one of the most underrated forms of strength you can build. Let me be clear about something. This chapter is not telling you to isolate yourself. Human connection is irreplaceable. It is one of the most beautiful parts of being alive. But here is what most people get backwards. The healthiest relationships are not built between people who cannot survive without each other. They are built between people who have already learned how to stand on their own 2 feet and then choose to walk together. The goal is not to replace connection with isolation. The goal is to stop being terrified of the moments when you find yourself alone. Because once you're no longer afraid of silence, something extraordinary happens. You start hearing a voice you had almost forgotten existed, your own. And that voice has been waiting patiently for you to listen. Chapter 2. Become your own closest friend. Here's a thought experiment. Imagine canceling every plan you have this Saturday. No brunch with friends, no errands to run, no binge watching a new series. Just you, an entire day, and absolutely nothing on the agenda. How does that make you feel? Excited? Peaceful? Or does something in your chest tighten just a little? Your honest reaction tells you everything you need to know about your relationship with yourself. If the thought of spending a whole day alone feels like a punishment, it is not because solitude is inherently unpleasant. It is because somewhere along the way, you stopped enjoying the company of the person you are when no one else is in the room. Most people invest enormous energy into becoming someone the world will admire. They polish their resumes to impress hiring managers. They curate their social media to earn likes. They adjust their personality depending on which group they are sitting with. And none of that is necessarily wrong. Wanting to make a positive impression is human nature. But in the middle of all that performing, there is a question that almost nobody pauses long enough to ask. Do I actually like the person I become when the audience disappears? That question cannot be answered by your follower count. It cannot be answered by your job title or by how many invitations land in your inbox. It can only be answered in the quiet moments when the stage lights are off and you are sitting alone with your own thoughts, your own habits, and your own honest reflection. Here is the uncomfortable truth. You cannot outrun yourself. You can move to a different city, start a new job, reinvent your wardrobe, and completely overhaul your social circle, but the person living inside your head moves with you. That is why geographical cures almost never work long term. A fresh environment might feel thrilling for a few weeks, but eventually the novelty fades and you are left with the same internal conversation you packed in your suitcase. If you want that conversation to change, you have to change it intentionally. Start by noticing how you actually talk to yourself throughout the day. Most people speak to themselves with a harshness they would never aim at a friend. You make a small mistake at work, and your inner voice says something like, "Of course you messed that up. You always do." A date does not go well, and instead of processing it with compassion, you tell yourself you are fundamentally unlovable. A project does not turn out perfectly, and suddenly you are building a whole case for why you will never be good enough. These thoughts are not facts. They are habits, and like any habit, they can be replaced. Start speaking to yourself with the same honesty and warmth you would offer someone you genuinely care about. This is not about delusional positivity or pretending your weaknesses do not exist. It is about believing that you are capable of working on them. Think of a mentor you respect, someone who would tell you the truth but would never crush your spirit while doing it. They would point out where you went wrong, but they would also remind you that one setback does not erase your potential. That is the voice you want to cultivate inside your own mind. Direct enough to keep you growing, gentle enough to keep you moving forward. Another powerful way to become someone you enjoy spending time with is to stay endlessly curious. Curious people rarely experience boredom because every day brings something new to explore. Pick up a book on a subject you know nothing about. Try learning a skill that has nothing to do with your career. Start a journal, not the kind where you just list what happened, but the kind where you ask yourself real questions. What do I genuinely value? What kind of person am I slowly becoming? Which of my daily habits are quietly shaping the future I will wake up to in 5 years? Every honest answer you write down strengthens the thread that connects you to yourself. This kind of inner work also rewires the way you experience free time. Instead of viewing an empty evening as a void that needs to be filled, you begin seeing it as a gift. It becomes space to learn, to reflect, to create something, or to simply rest without guilt. You stop treating every unscheduled hour as a crisis. You start recognizing that your most important ideas often arrive during the moments when your calendar has nothing to say. Consider the story of Marcus Delaney, a software engineer living in Seattle who spent his work weeks in an open-plan office surrounded by constant chatter and collaboration. He thrived during business hours, but weekends were a different story. The moment Friday evening arrived, a vague uneasiness settled over him. His apartment felt too quiet. So he filled every hour with streaming services, group chats, and social plans he did not even enjoy that much. By Sunday night, he felt drained rather than restored, and Monday morning arrived with a sense of exhaustion rather than readiness. One rainy weekend, Marcus tried something he had never considered before. Instead of flooding his Saturday with noise, he decided to spend the morning at a small coffee shop near the waterfront with nothing but a notebook. No laptop, no headphones, just him and his thoughts. The first hour felt strange, almost agitating, but by the second cup of coffee, something loosened. He began writing down ideas he had been too busy to notice, goals he had quietly shelved, observations about his life that he had never taken the time to examine. He made it a weekly ritual. Within a few months, those Saturday mornings became the highlight of his week, not because anything dramatic happened, but because they gave him a chance to reconnect with himself in a way that no group chat ever could. Stories like Marcus's illustrate something important. Enjoying your own company is not a personality trait you're born with. It is a practice you develop over time. Every time you choose self-reflection over mindless scrolling, you strengthen that muscle. Every time you invest in your own character Rather than chasing constant external stimulation, you become a richer, more grounded person on the inside. And there is an unexpected side effect that comes with this shift. When you genuinely enjoy your own company, you stop placing the entire burden of your happiness on other people's shoulders. Your friendships become lighter because they are no longer carrying the weight of your emotional survival. Your romantic relationships become healthier because you are sharing your life with someone rather than using them to fill a void. You appreciate people without clinging to them. You value connection without panicking at its absence. This quiet self-sufficiency does not make you cold. It actually makes you warmer because the love you offer is no longer tangled up with neediness. Becoming your own closest friend is not about achieving perfection. Nobody reaches that destination, and honestly, chasing it would make you miserable. The real aim is growth, becoming slightly wiser today than you were yesterday, slightly more patient, slightly more aware, slightly more at peace with the person looking back at you in the mirror. And one day, you will find yourself in a room with no agenda, no distractions, and no one to perform for. Instead of reaching for your phone, you will simply sit there, and instead of feeling empty, you will feel something quiet and powerful. You will feel at home. That is what happens when you stop trying to escape yourself and start building a friendship with the person you actually are. Chapter 3. Tune into the signal, beneath the static. Every single day, your mind is being pulled in 100 different directions. Messages from friends, emails from work, headlines designed to trigger anxiety, advertisements telling you what you need to buy to finally feel happy. Social media feeds curated to make you compare, react, and consume. Every notification is a tiny hand tugging at your sleeve, demanding your attention, telling you what to think, what to want, what to fear. And somewhere beneath all of that noise, there is a voice that belongs only to you. It is quiet. It does not compete. It does not shout over the chaos or fight for your attention. It simply waits, patiently, for the moment you finally decide to listen. This is one of the most underestimated challenges of living in a hyper-connected world. We have access to more information than any generation in history, yet we are more disconnected from our own inner wisdom than ever before. Your intuition, your values, your deepest sense of what is right and wrong, all of it speaks in a whisper. And whispers do not survive in a storm of constant input. That inner voice communicates through your gut feelings, your recurrent thoughts, and the quiet convictions that surface when you are honest with yourself. If you never slow down long enough to hear it, you risk spending years building a life based on someone else's blueprint. You follow a career path because it impressed your parents. You chase milestones because social media told you that you were behind. You adopt opinions because they were popular, not because you ever stopped to ask whether they were actually yours. Then one morning, you wake up and the life surrounding you feels like it belongs to a stranger. That disorientation is not random. It is the natural consequence of spending too long listening outward while forgetting to listen inward. Reconnecting with yourself requires deliberate silence. And at first, that silence will feel anything but peaceful. Your mind has been trained to expect constant stimulation, so when you remove it, expect resistance. Thoughts will race. Worries will pop up uninvited. Random memories from years ago might suddenly replay themselves for no apparent reason. Do not panic. This is completely normal. Think of a snow globe that has just been shaken violently. Everything inside is swirling, chaotic, impossible to see through. But what happens if you simply set it down and wait? The snow settles. The scene inside becomes clear again. Your mind works the same way. Clarity does not come from forcing your thoughts into neat rows. It comes from giving them the space to settle on their own. One of the most valuable things quiet reflection teaches you is the difference between what is urgent and what actually matters. Modern life has blurred that line almost completely. Every ping on your phone feels like it requires an immediate reaction. Every minor inconvenience feels catastrophic because it is right in front of your face. But silence changes the lens. It lets you zoom out and ask questions that a hurried mind never has time for. Will this situation matter 6 months from now? Am I reacting out of genuine concern or just anxiety? Is this choice pulling me closer to the person I want to become or further away? These are not the kinds of questions that surface while you are frantically multitasking. They show up when your thoughts finally have room to stretch out and breathe. Here's something else worth remembering. Many of life's most damaging mistakes are not caused by a lack of intelligence. They are caused by a lack of pause. Words launched in anger that cannot be taken back. Decisions made in panic that unravel months of progress. Commitments accepted without reflection that slowly drain you dry. A single pause, just a few heartbeats of silence between the impulse and the action, can change the trajectory of an entire relationship, an entire career, sometimes an entire life. That pause is where wisdom lives, and the more often you visit it, the less likely you are to be hijacked by your own reactions. Silence also unlocks something many people overlook: creativity. Some of the most groundbreaking ideas in history did not strike during moments of frantic productivity. They arrived during solitary walks, quiet mornings, unhurried evenings, with nothing but an open mind. Creativity does not always announce itself with a lightning bolt of inspiration. Sometimes it shows up as a gentle nudge, a subtle connection between two ideas that had never been placed next to each other before. But creativity needs breathing room. A mind stuffed to the edges with notifications and noise has no space left for anything original to grow. Listening to yourself also means getting honest with yourself, and that part is not always comfortable. There might be ambitions you have been burying because they feel unrealistic. There might be fears you have wallpapered over with busyness, so you never have to look directly at them. There might be habits you already know are holding you back, but confronting them would require effort you have been avoiding. Silence has a way of laying all of this out on the table, not to shame you, not to overwhelm you, simply to say, here it is. What would you like to do about it? That kind of honesty is not a punishment. It is the starting line of real change. You cannot redesign a life you refuse to examine. When you see your strengths clearly, you gain confidence. When you see your blind spots clearly, you gain direction. Both are gifts. And then there is another voice beneath the noise that most people walk right past without noticing. It is the voice of gratitude. In a world that constantly reminds you of what you do not have yet, it is remarkably easy to forget what is already here. But when you slow down, really slow down, you start to notice things. The warmth of morning light coming through your window, The fact that someone in your life genuinely cares about you. The quiet pride of having survived things that once felt impossible. The simple miracle of another day to try again. Gratitude is always speaking. It just cannot compete with the volume of everything else until you turn the noise down. You do not need to disappear into the mountains to practice this. It can happen anywhere. During a walk before the city wakes up, while sitting with a cup of tea before your inbox starts demanding things, while watching the sky shift colors at the end of the day without reaching for your camera. These moments are small, but they are mighty. They remind you that peace is not hiding in some distant future. It is sitting right here, waiting for you to notice. Make it a habit to protect these moments of quiet the way you would protect anything valuable, because the world will always have opinions, but the voice that deserves your deepest attention is the one that already knows who you are beneath all the noise. Chapter 4. Stop borrowing your identity from the world. From the day you arrived on this planet, the world started telling you who to be. Your family had hopes for your future before you could even speak. School ranked you against your classmates before you understood what grades really meant. Friends shaped your taste in music, your sense of humor, your definition of cool. And society, that enormous invisible force, quietly handed you a checklist. Earn this much. Look like this. Achieve that by this age. Be impressive. None of this was necessarily malicious. Most of it came from people who genuinely cared about you. But somewhere in the middle of absorbing everyone else's expectations, something important got lost. Your own. There is a critical difference between learning from other people and letting other people decide who you are. The first one helps you grow. The second one puts your entire sense of self on a leash held by someone else's hand. And when your confidence depends entirely on whether people are applauding or criticizing you at any given moment, you have essentially handed the steering wheel of your life to passengers who do not even know your destination. Think about how many decisions you have made not because they felt right, but because they would look right. How many times you swallowed your real opinion to avoid rocking the boat. How many dreams you quietly shelved because they did not fit the image you were expected to maintain. From the outside, everything might have looked fine. Inside, there was a slow, creeping disconnection from the person you actually wanted to become. Approval is a peculiar drug. It feels wonderful in the moment, but the effect wears off almost immediately, leaving you hungry for the next dose. And the cost of chasing it is enormous. You start living reactively, constantly adjusting yourself based on the last piece of feedback you received, like a sailboat that changes direction with every gust of wind instead of steering toward a fixed point on the horizon. One of the greatest gifts solitude offers is the space to ask questions nobody else can answer for you. What do you actually believe when no one is watching? What values would you defend even if it cost you popularity? What kind of character are you building when the cameras are off? These questions demand honesty, not applause. They ask you to construct your identity from the inside out, brick by brick, based on what you know to be true about yourself, rather than borrowing a prefabricated identity from the crowd. Imagine two photographs of yourself. The first one shows you the way the world sees you. It changes constantly because public perception is fickle. One week, you are praised. The next week, you are questioned. The image shifts with every new opinion. The second photograph shows who you are when nobody is looking. It changes only when your character changes. It reflects your honesty, your discipline, your compassion, your courage. If you spend your whole life retouching the first photograph while ignoring the second, you might look successful to the world while feeling like a stranger to yourself. This is why character will always outweigh reputation. Reputation is what people say about you at a dinner party. Character is what you do when nobody will ever find out. Reputation can be destroyed by a single misunderstanding. Character stays with you through every storm because it was built by you, not borrowed from someone else. Consider Priya Acharya, a marketing director at a fast-growing startup in Austin. On paper, she was thriving. Her campaigns won industry recognition. Her team respected her creativity, and her LinkedIn profile painted the picture of someone who had it all figured out. But beneath the polished surface, Priya lived in a constant state of anxiety. Every client meeting felt like a performance review. If a campaign underperformed even slightly, she spiraled into self-doubt for days. If a colleague received public praise, and she did not, she interpreted the silence as evidence that she was falling behind. One evening, after a particularly exhausting quarter, Priya sat down and asked herself a question she had been avoiding. Whose version of success am I actually chasing? The answer unsettled her. She realized she had been measuring her entire worth against metrics that changed every quarter and opinions that shifted with every project. She started a new practice. After every major campaign, instead of immediately scanning for external validation, she asked herself 4 questions. Did I bring my best effort to this? Did I lead my team with integrity? Did I learn something that makes me better? Am I proud of how I showed up? Those questions redirected her focus from applause to alignment. Her work did not suffer. If anything, it improved because she stopped performing out of fear and started creating from conviction. She still valued recognition, but she no longer needed it to believe she was good at what she did. There is a specific kind of freedom that opens up when you stop auditioning for the approval of people who barely know you. You waste less energy pretending. You become more comfortable admitting when you are wrong because your worth is no longer threatened by imperfection. You start pursuing goals that actually mean something to you, even if they are not trendy or widely understood. Instead of asking, does everyone agree with my choices? You start asking, do my choices agree with my values? That one shift changes everything. This does not mean becoming arrogant or refusing to listen. The wisest people stay teachable their entire lives. They welcome constructive criticism because they are committed to growth. But they also know the difference between feedback that helps them improve and noise that just makes them second-guess themselves. They do not let every passing opinion rewrite their sense of self. Try ending each day with a brief internal check-in. Was I honest today? Did I keep my commitments? Did I act with integrity, even when it would have been easier not to? Did I take one step closer to the person I'm trying to become? These questions build a kind of self-respect that cannot be shaken by a bad review or a missed promotion, because they measure the only thing you can truly control, who you chose to be today. Chapter 5. Pour something meaningful into your solitude. Time alone is like a blank canvas leaning against the wall of an empty studio. Some people stare at it and feel anxious, convinced that the emptiness is the problem. Others pick up a brush and begin creating something that did not exist before. The canvas itself is neutral. Its value depends entirely on what you choose to put on it. Solitude works the same way. Leave it hollow, and boredom moves in almost immediately. But pour something purposeful into it, and it becomes one of the most productive, fulfilling parts of your entire life. There is a widespread myth that happiness requires constant excitement. People hop from one dopamine hit to the next, a new show, a new purchase, a packed weekend, believing that a full calendar is proof of a full life. But excitement has a short shelf life. The thrill of a vacation fades before the suitcase is unpacked. The buzz of a new gadget dulls within a week. Even celebrations eventually become photographs in a folder you rarely open. Meaning operates on a completely different timeline. It does not spike and crash. It accumulates quietly, leaving you with a steady sense that your time is being well spent. The art of being alone is not about chasing one entertaining moment after another. It is about building a life that continues to nourish you even when the party is over and the guests have gone home. One of the biggest traps people fall into is treating free time as escape time. Rest is essential, absolutely. Your mind and body need recovery. But there is a world of difference between resting and hiding. Rest leaves you recharged. Constant avoidance leaves you exactly where you started. If every quiet evening becomes nothing more than a numbing session, weeks blur into months, and months dissolve into years. Time passes regardless of how you spend it. The only question is whether it leaves you wiser or just older. Meaning starts with intention. Before asking how to spend your time, ask why it matters. Every hour carries the potential to become an investment rather than an expense. Reading a single chapter of a thought-provoking book might reshape the way you see a problem you have been struggling with for months. Learning a new skill might unlock a door you did not even know existed. Reflecting on yesterday's choices might save you from repeating the same mistake tomorrow. Even a simple walk through your neighborhood can shift your perspective if you stay present instead of mentally replaying your to-do list. Think about the people whose lives genuinely inspire you. Chances are they did not earn your admiration by filling every spare moment with entertainment. They stayed curious. They asked questions long after most people stopped caring. They practiced their craft on the days nobody was watching. They treated quiet hours not as empty containers, but as opportunities to deepen their understanding of the world and themselves. One of the most powerful ways to fill your solitude with meaning is through honest reflection. Reflection is not the same as rumination. Rumination is a hamster wheel. It spins around the same anxious thoughts without ever going anywhere. Reflection is different. It looks back at your day with the specific intention of learning from it. What brought me peace today? What tested my patience? Where did I act in alignment with my values, and where did I drift? What would I do differently if I could replay that conversation? These are not guilt-inducing questions. They are compass-setting questions. They gently steer your life in a better direction without drowning you in regret. Gratitude also transforms solitude from something you endure into something you treasure. It rewires the way you experience ordinary moments. Instead of constantly scanning the horizon, for the next big thing, you start noticing what is already within arm's reach. The sound of rain tapping against a window while you are warm inside. A meal that someone prepared with care. The fact that your body carried you through another day without you having to think about it. These things are easy to overlook when your mind is racing toward the next achievement. Solitude slows you down just enough to catch them. Creativity thrives in meaningful solitude too. You do not need to be a professional artist to live a creative life. Writing a few honest paragraphs in a journal is creative. Experimenting with a new recipe on a Sunday afternoon is creative. Rearranging your living space until it feels like it actually belongs to you is creative. Working through a complex problem at your desk with full concentration is creative. All of these activities share one thing in common. They demand your complete attention. And when you give something your complete attention, time bends, minutes stretch. The noise in your head quiets. You enter a state of absorption that passive scrolling will never, ever replicate. There will always be seasons when your schedule overflows and seasons when it empties out without warning. Instead of dreading the quiet stretches, start welcoming them. They offer something a packed calendar cannot. The space to strengthen the part of yourself that no audience ever sees. The part that thinks clearly, learns patiently, rests without guilt, and grows without applause. Solitude was never meant to be a vacuum. It was meant to be fertile soil. Plant wisdom there, and it takes root. Plant gratitude, and it grows. Plant curiosity, and it blossoms into ideas you never expected. Every meaningful habit you cultivate in the quiet hours becomes something you carry into every conversation, every relationship, every challenge you face. When you fill your solitude with purpose, you stop defining alone time by what is missing. You start defining it by what is present. A richer mind, a steadier heart, and a version of yourself that does not need an audience to feel whole. Chapter 6. Build the strength to stand on your own. Standing on your own does not mean standing against the world. It does not mean rejecting help, dismissing friendship, or pretending you have every answer. It means cultivating a quiet, unshakable steadiness inside yourself so that when external support disappears, when approval dries up, when the crowd thins out, you are still standing. Not because you are stubborn, but because your roots go deep enough to hold you upright. Think about a river carving its way through solid rock. It does not use force. It does not rush. It simply keeps flowing day after day, year after year, until the stone yields. That is what genuine inner strength looks like. It is not loud. It is not aggressive. It is persistent, patient, and built through repetition. A lot of people confuse dependence with closeness. They believe that constantly needing someone's reassurance, guidance, or permission is a sign of deep connection. And while healthy relationships absolutely involve trust and mutual support, there is a line where connection quietly becomes crutch. When you need another person's opinion before making even small decisions, when you cannot sit with uncertainty for more than a few minutes without texting someone for comfort, when your confidence collapses the moment external validation disappears, you have crossed that line. And the longer you stay on the wrong side of it, the harder it becomes to trust your own judgment. Self-reliance starts with a deceptively simple idea: accepting full responsibility for your own life. Most people nod when they hear that, but very few actually practice it consistently because responsibility is heavy. It is far easier to point at bad timing, difficult people, or unfair circumstances when things go wrong. And sometimes those factors are genuinely real. Life is not always fair. But even when the situation is beyond your control, your response to it never is. The moment you stop waiting for someone else to fix your life is the exact moment you start discovering how resourceful you actually are. Think about how many skills you have already acquired through sheer persistence. You learned to walk by falling down hundreds of times. You learned to read by stumbling over words that made no sense until suddenly they did. You learned to navigate social dynamics, professional expectations, and personal relationships through trial and painful error. At no point did confidence arrive before the struggle. It arrived because of it. That pattern does not stop applying just because you are an adult now. Every problem you work through independently, every uncomfortable conversation you handle with honesty, every decision you make without outsourcing your judgment adds another layer to your inner foundation. And that foundation is the only one nobody else can build for you. One of the biggest reasons people avoid standing alone is the fear of being wrong. They convince themselves that making a bad decision is the same as being a bad person. But those are two entirely different things. A mistake is evidence that you participated, that you tried, that you were brave enough to act instead of hiding behind indecision. The person who never makes a wrong move is usually the person who never makes any move at all. Growth does not demand perfection. It demands willingness. Solitude accelerates this process because it forces you to sit with your own thinking. When you reflect instead of constantly reacting, you start noticing how capable you really are. You realize that most problems do not require a committee. They require patience, honest assessment, and the courage to take the next reasonable step. Before reaching for someone else's answer, try asking yourself 3 questions. What do I already understand about this situation? What information am I missing, and where can I find it? What feels like the wisest next move? You will be surprised how often your own answers are more than sufficient. Consider Naomi Ashford, a supervising nurse in a busy emergency department in Chicago. Her colleagues trusted her instincts during chaotic shifts, but behind the scenes, Naomi second-guessed nearly every administrative decision she made. Scheduling conflicts, policy updates, team disagreements, she handled all of them by polling as many people as possible, hoping the consensus would protect her from making the wrong call. The irony was that her constant hesitation often created more tension than the original problem. During a particularly stressful winter, Naomi's mentor suggested a simple experiment. Before asking anyone else what to do, write down your own recommendation first, just on paper, just for yourself. Naomi resisted at first, convinced she would get it wrong, but she tried it. She started keeping a small notebook in her locker. Every time a decision landed on her desk, she wrote down the facts, weighed the options, and recorded what she believed the best course of action would be. Only then did she seek outside input if she still felt uncertain. Within a few months, a pattern emerged that genuinely surprised her. Her initial instincts were thoughtful, balanced, and almost always aligned with the advice she would have received anyway. She had been carrying sound judgment along. She had simply never trusted herself enough to use it without a safety net. Naomi still valued her colleagues' perspectives, but she no longer needed them to function. The confidence she developed did not come from being right every time. It came from proving to herself that she was capable of thinking clearly under pressure on her own terms. Her story illustrates a truth that applies far beyond the workplace. Confidence is not a gift that arrives one day in a neatly wrapped box. It is built through accumulated evidence. Every time you face something difficult, instead of dodging it, you collect another piece of that evidence. Every honest conversation, every decision rooted in integrity, every obstacle navigated with patience becomes another stone in the structure of your character. Nobody else can lay those stones for you. There will be moments when standing alone feels deeply uncomfortable. You might hold a belief that puts you at odds with the people around you. You might choose a path that nobody in your circle understands. You might say no to something everyone expects you to say yes to. In those moments, remember this: popularity and wisdom do not always travel together. Some of the most important decisions you will ever make will be understood by very few people at the time you make them. Training yourself to stand alone also means building emotional steadiness. Praise should warm you, but not intoxicate you. Criticism should inform you, but not demolish you. Success should motivate you, and failure should educate you, but neither one should become the core of your identity. When your emotional equilibrium depends entirely on what is happening around you, life will feel like a constant roller coaster. Inner strength means building your sense of self on values that hold steady, regardless of external conditions. The person who learns to stand on their own does not become isolated or cold. They become deeply rooted, quietly confident, prepared to love others freely precisely because they are no longer depending on others to hold them together. Chapter 7. Let your emotions speak before you silence them. Every emotion that moves through you arrives carrying a message. Joy is pointing at the things that make your life meaningful. Fear is tapping you on the shoulder, telling you to pay attention. Anger is often a signal that something feels deeply unjust. Sadness is asking you to slow down and honor what has been lost. These are not malfunctions in your system. They are data, rich, important, often inconvenient data that your inner world is trying to deliver. But most people treat their emotions like uninvited guests. The second discomfort appears, they reach for a distraction. They numb the feeling with noise, activity, food, scrolling, anything that creates enough interference to drown out the signal. And it works, temporarily. The discomfort fades, but the message it carried does not disappear. It just gets filed away, unread, building up like unopened mail behind a door you refuse to open. One of the most profound benefits of spending time alone is that it gives your emotional life room to breathe. When the external noise quiets down, the internal signals get louder. And yes, that can be uncomfortable. You might discover anxiety you have been carrying for months without naming it. Old disappointments might surface that you thought you had moved past. Fears you buried under a packed schedule might suddenly sit down across the table from you and demand a conversation. The instinct is to push them back down. But real peace is never built by suppressing what you feel. It is built by understanding it. Think about an orchestra. A cellist does not sit in rehearsal resenting the trumpet player for being louder. A violinist does not question her worth because the percussionist gets more dramatic moments. Each instrument has its own voice, its own timing, its own role in the larger piece. The music only works because every player focuses on their own part instead of trying to play someone else's. Human lives operate on the same principle. Some people bloom early, some peak later, some build families first and careers second, others do it the opposite way. None of these timelines is objectively better. They are simply different. Comparison also creates a treadmill you can never step off. Even when you achieve something meaningful, the satisfaction is immediately diluted because you instantly look around to see if someone else achieved more. Goals that once thrilled you now feel underwhelming because you measured them against a stranger's highlight. This way of living makes genuine contentment almost mathematically impossible, because no matter how far you go, there will always be someone further ahead. Consider Julian Thorne, a freelance photographer based in Portland who spent his early career genuinely in love with his craft. He would spend entire afternoons chasing the perfect light, experimenting with angles, and losing himself in the creative process. But as his online presence grew, so did his habit of watching what other photographers were doing. Every award someone else received felt like a personal slight. Every viral post from a competitor made him question whether his own work was good enough. The joy that had originally drawn him to photography slowly evaporated, replaced by a constant gnawing anxiety that he was falling behind. Eventually, Julian recognized what was happening. He was no longer creating for himself. He was competing with strangers. He made a deliberate decision to change his morning routine. Instead of opening social media the moment he woke up, he spent the first 90 minutes of each day reviewing his own portfolio, sketching ideas for upcoming shoots, and studying techniques that excited him, not because they were trending, but because they genuinely stretched his abilities. Within a few months, his creativity returned, his confidence stabilized, and the work he produced started feeling like his again because it was being driven by curiosity instead of comparison. Julian's experience highlights something critical. Comparison does not only steal your happiness, it steals your attention. And your attention is the single most valuable resource you own. Every moment spent monitoring someone else's progress is a moment that could have been invested in your own growth. Your biggest breakthroughs will not happen while you're watching someone else's feed. They will happen while you are fully immersed in your own work, your own learning, your own life. Gratitude is comparison's natural antidote. You genuinely cannot feel deprived and grateful at the same time. They are mutually exclusive states of mind. Each day is loaded with things worth appreciating, but they become invisible when your lens is permanently focused on what is missing. When you deliberately notice the progress you have made, the people who care about you, the skills you have built, and the quiet blessings that require no applause, your entire perspective recalibrates. You stop feeling behind because you realize you were never in a race to begin with. It also helps to remember that someone else's success does not shrink your own possibilities. Success is not a finite pie where every slice someone else takes means less for you. Another person winning does not mean you are losing. Their achievement can inspire you, teach you, even motivate you without subtracting a single thing from your own potential. Replace why them with what can I learn from them, and jealousy quietly transforms into fuel. Give yourself permission to step off the scoreboard entirely. Your life is not meant to be measured against anyone else's timeline. It is meant to be lived with intention, gratitude, and the steady pursuit of becoming your fullest self, at your own pace, according to your own values, on the unique path that belongs to nobody else but you. Chapter 9. Choose what is deep over what is easy. The modern world has mastered the art of keeping you busy without ever letting you feel fulfilled. There is always another notification to check, another video to watch, another tab to open, another task that feels urgent even when it is not. If you are standing in line for 90 seconds, your hand drifts toward your pocket before your brain even registers what it is doing. If you are sitting in a waiting room, the idea of simply sitting, just existing without input, feels almost physically uncomfortable. And that discomfort should tell you something important. Constant distraction is seductive because it asks nothing of you. It entertains without requiring you to reflect. It fills time without making you confront anything meaningful. It delivers tiny, effortless dopamine hits that feel satisfying in the moment, but leave absolutely nothing behind. There is nothing wrong with unwinding or enjoying light entertainment now and then. The danger is when distraction becomes your automatic reaction to every quiet moment. Because when that happens, something irreplaceable is lost. The opportunity to think deeply, to understand yourself, and to engage with life at a level that actually nourishes you. Depth lives on the other side of distraction. It is found in giving your undivided attention to one meaningful thing instead of scattering fragments of attention across 20 meaningless ones. Think about the conversations you still remember years later. They were not rushed text exchanges or half-distracted chats. They were unhurried, honest, and fully present. The same principle applies everywhere. Meaning does not grow where attention flickers. It grows where attention stays. Imagine trying to read a sentence at the bottom of a swimming pool while someone keeps throwing coins into the water above you. Every splash creates another ripple. The surface never calms enough for you to see clearly. Your mind works the exact same way. Every unnecessary interruption is another coin hitting the water. Decisions become reactive. Creativity weakens. Even simple pleasures lose their texture because your awareness is always being pulled somewhere else. One of the greatest investments you can make in yourself is the ability to focus completely. When you read without reaching for your phone every few paragraphs, you absorb more. When you listen to someone without mentally rehearsing your reply, the connection deepens. When you work with genuine concentration, the quality rises while the stress often drops. Depth is not about doing more things. It is about experiencing the things you do more fully. Most people do not actually need more hours in the day. They need fewer interruptions within the hours they already have. Time matters, but attention matters more because attention determines the quality of every minute you spend. An hour fully invested in something meaningful leaves you feeling energized. An hour lost to mindless scrolling leaves you wondering where it went and vaguely disappointed in yourself. This is exactly why solitude is so valuable. It creates the conditions for deep thinking to occur. Without constant pings and notifications, your mind starts making connections it could not make before. Problems that seemed stuck suddenly shift. Ideas that had been floating just out of reach drift close enough to grab. Questions you have been carrying for weeks quietly find their answers. None of this happens through force. It happens because your mind finally has enough stillness to work the way it was designed to. Choosing depth also changes the way you relate to other people. A few genuine, invested friendships will always outweigh 100 shallow acquaintances. One truly present conversation strengthens a relationship more than 50 distracted exchanges ever could. Being fully there for someone, even briefly, leaves a deeper impression than spending hours together while your mind is elsewhere. People do not remember how many words you said. They remember how deeply you listened. There is a quiet confidence that comes with slowing down. When you stop bouncing from one distraction to the next, you become more deliberate. You choose your words with more care. You notice details that hurried people walk right past. A streak of light cutting across a wall in the late afternoon. The way someone's voice softens when they are talking about something that matters. The rhythm of your own breathing when you finally stop long enough to notice it. These things are always happening. They just become invisible when your attention is fragmented. The world will always celebrate speed. It will praise the people who respond instantly, stay perpetually connected, and never appear to sit still. But busyness is not the same thing as significance. A meaningful life is rarely built on velocity alone. It is built through thoughtful, intentional action, guided by values you actually chose instead of distractions you defaulted into. In the end, your life will not be defined by how much content you consumed or how many notifications you cleared. It will be shaped by what received your deepest, most sustained attention. The ideas you carefully explored, the people you genuinely loved, the values you lived by when it would have been easier to take shortcuts. When you choose depth over distraction, you are not stepping away from the world. You are finally learning how to be fully inside it. Chapter 10. Stop handing your peace to your circumstances. Life does not ask for your permission before it rearranges itself. A career you built over a decade can dissolve in a single conversation. A relationship that felt permanent can shift overnight. Health you took for granted can suddenly demand your full attention. Plans you spent months crafting can crumble in ways you never imagined possible. And if your inner peace is duct taped to favorable conditions, then every unexpected change will rip it right off. Most people carry around an invisible contract with the universe. It reads something like this: I will be happy when everything lines up the way I want. Once I earn enough money, I will stop worrying. Once I find the right partner, I will finally feel whole. Once life calms down, I will finally relax. The goals themselves are not the problem. Working toward a better life is one of the most natural human instincts. The problem is making peace conditional, because life almost never delivers perfect conditions, and on the rare occasions it does, those conditions do not come with a lifetime guarantee. Think about the weather. You would never expect every single day to be warm and sunny. You accept that storms are part of the deal. You prepare for them instead of being personally offended by their existence. But when it comes to life, people treat every setback as evidence that something has gone catastrophically wrong. In reality, Change is not an interruption to your story. It is one of the story's permanent features. The sooner you make peace with that, the less power unexpected events will hold over your emotional state. Solitude teaches you to anchor your stability in something deeper than your situation. When you spend time reflecting on your values, instead of constantly reacting to whatever is happening around you, a shift occurs. You realize that your integrity does not evaporate because you failed at something. Your kindness does not disappear because someone criticized you. Your patience and courage travel with you no matter what the external landscape looks like. These internal qualities become your real foundation, and unlike circumstances, they cannot be confiscated by events beyond your control. This shift in perspective transforms the way you handle difficulty. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" you begin asking, "How can I respond to this with wisdom?" The first question traps you in victimhood because it fixates on things you cannot change. The second question hands you back your power because it focuses on the one thing you always control, your response. That single mental pivot can turn a setback from a reason to collapse into an opportunity to practice resilience. Consider Raymond Solis, a man who spent 27 years building a family restaurant in San Antonio from a tiny taqueria into a neighborhood landmark. The restaurant was not just a business, it was his identity. His mornings started in the kitchen, his evenings ended greeting regular customers by name. When he finally sold the business and stepped into retirement at 61, he expected relief. Instead, he felt unmoored. Without the rhythm of the restaurant, without the daily purpose it provided, he felt like a man standing in a room where all the furniture had been removed. For months, Raymond tried to replicate the old feeling. He visited other restaurants, offered unsolicited advice to their owners, and kept a schedule as if he were still running the kitchen. Nothing worked. Then one morning, while sitting at his kitchen table watching the sunrise through the window, he asked himself a question he had been dodging. If I am not the restaurant, then who am I? That question opened a door. Raymond started volunteering at a local community center, teaching cooking classes to teenagers who had never learned to prepare a meal from scratch. He began walking every morning along the river walk, not to get anywhere, but simply to think. He started reading books his late wife had loved, books he had always been too busy to open. Slowly, he discovered that his sense of self did not have to be glued to a single role. His warmth, his generosity, his discipline, those qualities had never belonged to the restaurant. They belonged to him. Raymond's story is a reminder that life will always ask you to adapt. Careers end. Children grow up. Friendships shift. Dreams evolve into different shapes. If your identity is built entirely on a specific circumstance, then every change will feel like losing a piece of yourself. But when your identity is anchored in your character, change becomes something you navigate rather than something that dismantles you. This does not mean pretending that loss does not sting. It does. Disappointment is real. Uncertainty is uncomfortable. The goal is not to become emotionally bulletproof. The goal is to remember that your current chapter is not your final chapter. Circumstances describe where you are standing right now. They do not dictate where you are capable of going. Start each morning by identifying what is within your control. You cannot control the economy. You cannot control other people's opinions. You cannot control the weather or the news cycle or the unexpected curveballs life throws without warning. But you can control your attitude, your effort, your integrity, your words, your habits. These choices seem small in isolation, but compounded over time, they build a life that is far less dependent on external conditions and far more grounded in internal strength. Peace is an inside job. The quieter your mind becomes, the more clearly you see that lasting contentment does not come from arranging perfect circumstances. It comes from developing a character that stays faithful to its values through every season, sunny or stormy. When hardship arrives, meet it with patience. When success arrives, hold it with gratitude. Let your circumstances shape your experience, but never let them author your identity. Chapter 11. Discover how little you actually need. One of the quietest, most underrated forms of freedom is realizing that you do not need nearly as much as you thought you did. Modern life operates on a very specific assumption that happiness is always one purchase, one promotion, one achievement, one upgrade away. There is always a shinier version of everything just around the corner, and while ambition is a beautiful engine, a life built entirely on more eventually becomes a life where enough never arrives. The finish line keeps retreating, and contentment stays permanently out of reach. Solitude teaches a different math. When you spend time alone, stripped of the noise that tells you what you should want, you begin noticing how little is actually required for a genuinely good day. A slow morning with no agenda. A conversation that leaves you feeling understood. The warmth of sunlight landing on your shoulders during a walk you almost did not take. A book that shifts the way you see a problem. These experiences rarely cost anything, yet they quietly fill you in ways that no purchase ever has. Wanting less is not about shrinking your life. It is about sharpening your vision. It is the difference between pursuing something because it genuinely aligns with who you are and pursuing it because the world made you feel incomplete without it. Do you chase success because you are already whole and want to contribute more? Or do you chase it because you are terrified that without it, you are not enough? Those are two fundamentally different motivations, and they lead to two very different experiences of life. Think about a room stuffed so full of furniture that you can barely move through it. Even beautiful objects lose their impact when they are crammed together. Your mind works the same way. Too many commitments create stress. Too many possessions create responsibility. Too many distractions create mental clutter. Simplicity is not emptiness. It is space. And space is where peace does its best work. This principle reaches beyond material things. Sometimes the heaviest things you carry are invisible. Old grudges you keep replaying. Guilt over decisions you cannot undo. Unrealistic expectations you inherited from people who never asked what you actually wanted. Chronic worry about outcomes you cannot control. These burdens do not show up on any shelf, but they take up enormous room in your inner world. Learning to set them down is often just as liberating as clearing out a cluttered closet. There is a deep, quiet confidence that grows when you untangle your happiness from external markers. If your sense of worth depends on owning more than the next person, you will live in permanent anxiety because there will always be someone with more. But if your sense of worth is rooted in your character, your values, and your ability to appreciate what is already here, then very little can rattle you. You become hard to impress and equally hard to disappoint because your peace is not sitting on a shelf where someone else can knock it off. Gratitude is the natural companion of simplicity. It rewires the way you experience the ordinary, the sound of wind moving through trees outside your window, the comfort of a meal prepared without rushing, the quiet pride of ending a day knowing you lived it with integrity. These moments pass unnoticed when the mind is fixated on the next acquisition, but they become sources of genuine richness when you train yourself to see them. As you continue spending time alone, many desires that once felt urgent will quietly lose their grip. You will begin distinguishing between what you genuinely need and what was simply borrowed from someone else's expectations. That clarity is a gift. It allows you to channel your energy toward what truly matters instead of scattering it across things that only looked impressive from a distance. The freedom of wanting less is not limitation. It is liberation. It releases you from the exhausting belief that happiness is always somewhere else, always in the next chapter, always conditional on something you have not yet acquired. It invites you to discover that peace has been available this entire time, buried beneath layers of unnecessary noise, comparison, and striving. When you learn to recognize enough, you stop postponing your life. You start living it today with a grateful heart, a clear mind, and the quiet understanding that what truly matters has never had a price tag. Chapter 12. Protect your peace like it is sacred. Peace is not a trophy you win once and display on a shelf forever. It is more like a fire you tend. Leave it unattended for too long and it quietly dies. Feed it with the wrong material and it fills your space with smoke. But care for it consistently, protect it from the wind, and it becomes the warmest, most reliable part of your life. Many people treat inner peace as something that will magically appear once every external problem has been resolved. They imagine a future where the inbox is empty, the bills are paid, the relationships are effortless, and the calendar is perfectly balanced. In that fantasy, peace arrives as a natural byproduct of a problem-free life. But that fantasy never materializes because life is not in the business of running out of problems. There are people living in beautiful homes with restless minds, and there are people facing genuine hardship who carry a remarkable calm. The difference is never purely external. Peace is protected from the inside long before it is felt on the outside. One of the most common ways people quietly surrender their peace is by saying yes to everything. It often starts with good intentions. You want to be helpful. You want to be seen as reliable. You want to avoid the discomfort of disappointing someone. So you accept the extra project. You volunteer for the committee. You agree to the favor even though your week is already overflowing. One by one, those commitments stack up until there is no room left to breathe, let alone reflect. Your generosity slowly becomes a prison built with your own hands. Learning to say no is not cold. It is one of the wisest forms of self-respect. Every time you say yes to something that does not align with your priorities, you are quietly saying no to something that does: your rest, your family, your creative energy, your peace of mind. Wise people understand that their time and attention are finite currencies, and they spend them deliberately rather than letting other people write the checks. Consider Diane Kowalski, the executive director of a nonprofit in Denver that provided literacy programs for underserved communities. Diane's passion for the mission made her incapable of turning anyone down. She sat on 3 advisory boards, mentored half a dozen young professionals, responded to every email within the hour, and routinely worked through weekends. Her colleagues admired her dedication. Her family rarely saw her, and Diane herself could not remember the last time she had read a book that was not related to a grant proposal. The turning point arrived during a quiet Sunday morning when her teenage daughter said something that lodged itself permanently in Diane's chest. "You help everyone else's kids, Mom, but you are never actually here for yours." There was no anger in her daughter's voice, just a factual sadness that hit harder than any criticism ever could. Diane did not overhaul her life overnight, but she started making small, deliberate shifts. She began pausing before accepting any new commitment, giving herself 24 hours to ask whether it genuinely aligned with her deepest priorities. She stepped down from one board. She started protecting Sunday mornings as non-negotiable family time. She stopped answering emails after 7 in the evening. Some people were surprised, a few were disappointed, but most simply adjusted, and the relationships that truly mattered grew stronger because Diane was finally present for them instead of perpetually stretched thin. Her story is a reminder that protecting your peace often requires uncomfortable honesty. Not everyone will understand your boundaries, especially if they have been benefiting from the absence of them. But you cannot build a meaningful life by trying to satisfy every expectation the world places on you. Your job is not to please everyone. It is to live in alignment with the values you would be proud of at the end of the day. Guard your peace by being intentional about what you allow into your mind. Not every opinion deserves your mental real estate. Not every argument deserves your participation. Not every piece of news requires your emotional response. Some battles lead to understanding. Others simply drain you without changing anything. Wisdom is knowing which is which, and sometimes the most powerful response is simply choosing silence. Small daily habits become the invisible architecture of a peaceful life. A few minutes of quiet thought before the day begins. A walk outside to reset your perspective. A few pages of something that calms your mind before sleep. These rituals are not dramatic, but compounded over months and years, they become the scaffolding that holds your inner world steady when the outer world gets chaotic. Your peace is not a luxury. It is the foundation beneath every good decision, every healthy relationship, and every moment of genuine happiness. Protect it the way you would protect anything irreplaceable, because that is exactly what it is. Chapter 13. Build a life that feels like yours. There comes a point in this journey where you stop searching for the missing piece and realize something quietly profound. Your life was never meant to be completed by something outside of you. Fulfillment is not a destination you arrive at once everything falls into place. It is a way of living that you build deliberately through the values you practice and the relationship you develop with yourself. Think back through everything you have explored so far. You learned to step into silence instead of running from it. You became someone whose own company feels like home. You tuned into the voice beneath the noise. You stopped borrowing your identity from the crowd. You poured meaning into your solitude. You built the strength to stand alone. You learned to sit with difficult emotions until they became teachers instead of enemies. You quit measuring your life against everyone else's highlight reel. You chose depth over easy distraction. You stopped handing your peace to circumstances you cannot control. You discovered how little you actually need to feel genuinely content. And you began protecting your inner peace as a daily practice. None of these lessons exist in isolation. Together, they form a foundation. And like the hull of a ship, that foundation is not the part anyone admires from the dock. People notice the sails, the flags, the way the vessel cuts through open water. But without a solid hull beneath the surface, none of those visible things would survive the first real storm. Your inner life works exactly the same way. People may admire your confidence, your calm, your achievements. But all of those qualities become fragile if they are not supported by honesty, patience, gratitude, discipline, and self-respect built through years of quiet, unglamorous effort. A complete life is also a balanced life. It makes room for ambition without letting ambition consume everything else. It values relationships without becoming emotionally hostage to them. It welcomes success without measuring personal worth exclusively by outcomes. It appreciates comfort while remembering that some of life's most valuable lessons arrive wrapped in difficulty. Balance does not mean every day is easy. It means your values remain steady, even when your circumstances do not. There is a difference between becoming impressive and becoming whole. A lot of people spend years chasing admiration, hoping that if enough people applaud, the inner emptiness will finally close. But admiration is temporary. It depends on opinions that shift with the wind. Self-respect is different. It grows quietly from keeping your promises, treating people with decency, remaining honest when it would be easier to cut corners, and continuing to grow without needing an audience. Self-respect is one of the few things that cannot be given to you by someone else or taken away by changing circumstances. Life is not asking you to become a different person. It is asking you to become more fully the person you already are. Too many people spend years wearing costumes designed by other people's expectations. They hide their real values to avoid pushback. They bury their ambitions to avoid the risk of failure. They silence their instincts to avoid standing out. But genuine fulfillment starts the moment you stop performing and begin living with authenticity. The world does not need another copy. It needs the original version of you. Progress matters more than perfection. There will still be hard days, mistakes, moments of doubt. That does not erase your growth. Every setback is another chance to practice what you have learned. Every challenge is another invitation to strengthen the character you are building. The goal was never to avoid struggle. It was to become someone who meets struggle with wisdom and steadiness. Chapter 14. Walk forward, whole and unshaken. Every long journey eventually delivers a quiet realization, not the kind that arrives with fanfare, but the kind that settles gently into your bones and stays there. It is the realization that you no longer fear being alone with yourself, that your happiness is no longer held hostage by approval, activity, or perfect conditions, that somewhere along the way, without fireworks or ceremony, you found the person you had been searching for, and that person was you. The art of being alone was never an invitation to withdraw from the world. Human connection remains one of life's most extraordinary gifts. Friendships sharpen you. Family grounds you. Love gives life a beauty that nothing else can replicate. But every one of those relationships becomes stronger when it is entered by someone who is already whole, someone who shares their life freely rather than clinging out of fear that being alone would be unbearable. As you carry these lessons forward, there will still be seasons you did not plan for, success that reshapes your life, disappointment that tests your resolve, people who enter your world with warmth and others who leave without explanation, plans that flourish and plans that dissolve. Through all of it, hold on to one truth. Your circumstances are chapters in your story. They are not the author. You are. Walking through the world whole means carrying your values with you regardless of the terrain. Choosing honesty when dishonesty seems easier. Remaining kind when bitterness feels justified. Practicing gratitude when complaining seems more popular. Protecting your peace without becoming indifferent to the people around you. These choices look ordinary on any given Tuesday, but repeated across years, they build something extraordinary. There is a specific kind of confidence that belongs to people who have learned to be comfortable in their own company. They do not need to dominate every room because they are at ease in silence. They do not chase validation because they already know their worth. They do not unravel when plans change because they trust their ability to adapt. They move through life with a quiet steadiness that becomes a source of calm for everyone around them. This confidence should never be mistaken for arrogance. Arrogance says, I do not need anyone. Wisdom says, I value people deeply, but I do not require them to tell me who I am. That distinction changes the texture of every relationship you have. It allows you to love without desperation, give without scorekeeping, celebrate someone else's win without feeling diminished. Some days you will naturally practice everything you have learned here. Other days you will catch yourself sliding back into old patterns, comparing, distracting, seeking approval you do not actually need. Do not be discouraged. Growth is not measured by the absence of stumbles. It is measured by how quickly and how willingly you return to the path. Protect your solitude. Treat it not as empty time, but as sacred time. Let silence remind you what matters. Let reflection sharpen your thinking. Let gratitude keep your heart soft. Let simplicity keep your life clear. And let the self-respect you have built become the quiet bedrock beneath everything you do. Conclusion: every meaningful journey leaves you with more than knowledge. It leaves you changed. If you have been truly present through these chapters, you already sense that this was never simply about learning to spend time alone. It was about discovering a way of living that cannot be easily rattled by the unpredictable nature of the world. Loneliness and solitude are not the same experience. Loneliness aches for connection that feels absent. Solitude deepens the connection you have with yourself. And that connection rewrites everything. It gives you the courage to stop performing for approval, the patience to understand your own emotions, the clarity to separate what truly matters from what merely looks impressive, the confidence to stand firmly on your values even when the crowd is walking a different direction. Perhaps the deepest lesson of all is that happiness cannot be outsourced. People can inspire you, love you, challenge you, and walk beside you, but they cannot permanently carry the weight of your peace. That responsibility is yours. And while that might sound heavy at first, it is actually the most liberating truth you will ever accept, because it means your happiness is no longer at the mercy of changing opinions, unpredictable events, or conditions you cannot control. The key has been in your pocket all along. There will still be storms. There will be mornings when uncertainty sits heavy on your chest and evenings when doubt whispers louder than usual. When those moments arrive, return to what you know. Return to silence. Return to gratitude. Return to reflection. Return to your values. These are not lessons to be memorized once and filed away. They are practices to be lived daily, imperfectly, and consistently. Growth is quiet. It does not demand applause. Like a river slowly shaping stone, it works through patience and repetition, carving something beautiful out of something that once seemed immovable. Every thoughtful decision, every honest conversation with yourself, every moment of distraction you chose not to chase, every boundary you protected, has been adding to the person you are becoming. Trust that process, even on the days when progress feels invisible. One day, someone may ask, what changed your life? They might expect you to name a dramatic event, a powerful mentor, or a lucky break. But you might surprise them. You might tell them about the day you stopped running from yourself, the day you sat down in the silence and, for the first time, felt no urge to escape, the day you realized that being alone was never the enemy. It was the teacher you had been avoiding for years. Walk forward with quiet confidence. Welcome people into your life. Cherish them. Learn from them. Love them without reservation. But never abandon yourself to keep someone else comfortable. Pursue meaningful goals, but never trade your peace for them. Keep growing. Keep giving. Keep learning. And keep returning to the one relationship that will accompany you through every sunrise, every setback, every triumph, and every tomorrow. Because in the end, the art of being alone was never about living without others. It was about living so fully within yourself that wherever life takes you, happiness, inner peace, and self-reliance travel with you. And that is a kind of freedom that no person, no circumstance, and no passing season can ever take away.